little bit about myself real quick. I'll get into some more later, but as Gary said, I'm rounding out a master's program at Harvard right now in management. But my focus and my specialty is in organizational behavior and industrial psychology. It's fascinating to me, I think, largely because I come from an engineering background, and that's very much the opposite. So the people part of the equation has become something that I have started focusing in and working towards consulting in more so than the engineering part of things lately. But in addition to that, yes, for 8 years I've been a project manager in civil engineering, and I design a lot of roadway and transportation related projects around Maryland, DC, and Virginia, and Costa Rica. Um, and so that's pretty much my day to day. But what I want to share with you all today is some concepts on motivational psychology and how they might be able to be applied to managerial communication. So before I pull up this PowerPoint deck, I'd like to ask you guys some questions. You can either unmute yourself or you can write in the chat. But when you think of motivational speaking, who or what do you think of? Are there some names that come to mind? Go ahead and popcorn and yell them out if you don't mind. Maybe not yell.
Tony Robbins.
Tony Robbins.
Gary Vaynerchuk. Eric Thomas.
Okay, all right, that's good. I love that Tony Robbins came out. Gary knows that this is the one that I'm always trying to pluck for first because I think it's the one at the top of everybody's mind. He's in movies, he's everywhere. He's Tony Robbins. So how many of you guys, raise of hand, folks, how many of you all have listened to a podcast or watched a speech or otherwise of a motivational speaker such as Tony Robbins? Okay. Now, how many of you have actually changed your behaviors based on what that person said and stuck to it? I see like this. Gary, you're the exception to the rule, my friend. Aaron. Yeah, so it's a lot less. I would say that the transfer rate is a lot less. And that's the point I'm trying to make here, is that why were those people motivational? Like, can somebody tell me why that person is considered motivational to you?
They were emphatic and spoke with conviction.
They spoke with conviction. So does speaking with conviction itself cause a change in behavior by yourself? Not necessarily. It's convincing, but I obviously have to convince you enough to change your own personal behavior. That's pretty powerful. That's strong. Like, that's hard to do. All right. Let's see. Can everybody see this screen? Does it look like a normal PowerPoint presentation? Thank you. All right. It's another hard thing to deal with. All right, so if you all don't mind, perhaps in just the chat, there's these 3 prompts right here. We usually would break into groups, but I don't know if that's necessary. Gary, I'll let you choose on that one. But if you all want to pick one of these 3 topics and write...
Hey, Ryan, if you want me to make some breakout rooms, we can do that real quick.
Okay, yeah, let me explain the prompt. In 5 minutes or less, with your group, pick one of these situations and respond to it as though you're a parent. So you're parenting the child and you'd like them to correct their behavior. Please go ahead and do that. Take with it what you will and give us what you got.
All right, so I'll send everybody into breakout rooms and then I'll pull you back.
All right.
Okay?
Thank you. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Yes.
The problem is I don't think anybody can see this, so they probably don't even know what the prompts are now, huh?
Yeah, I saw the second one, I think. They want to go outside, but they didn't finish their homework or something like that.
Yes. Homework
Okay.
must be completed
Yeah.
tonight, but they want to go outside.
Yes.
So what do you two think?
So we're supposed to respond as a parent.
As a parent.
I would say as a parent, it's always good to do the hard stuff first. you don't want to do your homework because you don't like it. So let's go ahead and get that out of the way, and then you can go ahead and go outside with your friends. So always focus on doing the hard thing or the thing that you do not like doing first, so you can get that out of the way and you can spend the rest of the day doing what you like.
I would probably view it in this way. So I'm also only 23, so the idea of kids right now is still a bit further away. But I would do it in like the opportunity cost example, where like, all right, if you want to go outside and play now, what are the consequences to that? Does that mean you have to stay up later to complete your homework? Does that mean you don't ever actually complete your homework? And what's the secondary effect to that as well? So the way I approach is let the choice be up to the child and let them see if they're willing to make that mistake, or if they're willing to like actually deal with the consequences for their decision.
I like that too. I like
That's interesting, actually. It's different. You both said very different ways of doing it.
Yeah.
If you were to reconcile between the two of you, what do you think you would say? You don't have to.
I think I'd go towards your direction, honestly. Like I would advise them strongly to get their work done first.
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, explaining opportunity cost to the child might be a little difficult, huh?
Yes, yeah, depending on the age of the child.
But I think that's a good, depending on their age, what Jared said, I think that's a good if they're like teenagers, if they're older.
If I can ask both of you, what about that opportunity cost situation is interesting? Like, why do you think that'd be better for them if they're older? What does that afford them?
To start to make decisions on their own, and to see if they can make proper, decisions on their own, just pushing them forward to make those decisions.
Room to grow, self-development. And if they were, let's say, in this situation, like a teenager, provide them that like little bit of self-autonomy that they might be striving for.
Autonomy. That's definitely the word I was looking for. You both hit it, though. Like, absolutely. If I tell you, go do this right now, you don't like that, right?
Yeah.
You want to feel like you want to go do it, But you're right. Weighing the options is definitely important.
I like that.
That's cool. Well, I don't want to give away all the cool juice. But well done.
What's been some of the crazier options you've ever heard explored?
Physical abuse has come up in multiple classes, actually.
Wow.
Like, you're going to get spanked or else, or you're going to do this. I was like, maybe we shouldn't start there, guys. Maybe we need to explore something deeper. I will say I've had some people that come out, like, pretty much writing the scripts that are from the book that this exercise is taken from, and they haven't read it before, so I thought that was impressive, where they are very, very well thought out ideas. But I don't know. I haven't had anything like crazy. I think the ones that stuck out the most for me, like I said, is probably the more abusive things, where I was like, it's unfortunate we still come to that. But I think a lot of our parenting is still traditionally based on basically power and authority roles and forcing things. And as you'll see, I'm trying to make that. Is that any different from how we manage people? What do you think of the boss? The boss is the man. The boss is, you know what I mean? Like that's. We still have these ideas of development of people beneath us as being not as superior of us, and so we kind of force things upon them. But guess what that never works out to do? Actually build people that can be successful and work well. So, pretty crazy. Where do you both work, if I don't mind asking?
I work at NASA.
Oh, casual. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm a lieutenant in the Army down here at Fort Eustis, so that authoritarian role is definitely very real in my workplace for some individuals.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're coming around to it, though, here lately.
Yeah, you get a mix and match.
You are. I mean, it's really interesting. They're actually hiring a lot of consultants and behavioral psychologists to come in and work on the military because of that, because it isn't always the most effective way,
Yeah, there's definitely a huge gap between, like, the drop-off of people who joined as officers, like, the past 4 or 5 years compared to, like, those 10, 15 years ahead, because
very
different culture and time frame and how that whole field has developed, it seems like. Because I got the exposure to actually get some organizational psychologists and behavioral psychologists to come in with the with my training.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really cool. That's good to know. That's excellent. So what do you do with NASA? I have to ask.
So my background, I'm a paralegal. So I started working for the Office of Chief Counsel as a paralegal. But recently, I got a position with one of the program office, working for one of the contracts. So right now, my job is training and developing administration. Administration, yeah.
Very cool. That's very exciting. That's awesome. Well, hopefully this is of value to you then.
It is. I am learning a lot, and I was very excited about this class. So yes.
That's cool. That's great.
As you can tell, I'm more of an introvert, so I'm trying to get out of my comfort zone. So this class is going to help me a lot.
Yeah, Gary's really good at that. I've literally seen Gary pull people that are afraid to speak in front of anybody and get them in front of audiences and do well. They might cry a little bit afterwards, but he gets them up there. He's very good at that. That's cool. Which class number is this for you all?
My third.
Okay, third. Excellent. That's good. Do you all have to do the same thing that the full-time students have to do of taking, like, aren't there like core courses you have to take first, like flagship core?
Yeah. They were just not bunched at the same time as them. Like, they're actually on, like, William & Mary's campus, and then we're just down the road at Newport and Hughes.
Right. That's cool. That's good. That's awesome. I like you guys because you guys tend to be a little bit more practical. I gave a lecture. I gave 2 lectures to the full-time students, I guess, in the fall when it was in person, and it was interesting just because people that get their MBA when they're fresh out of their undergrad but don't have a lot of work experience, which I love William & Mary for, because you have a good mix of different types of people. You could have people that are like former generals in your classes too. You know, it's really all over. But it was interesting because some of them had some you can tell that they haven't worked that job yet. You know what I mean? They haven't really come in contact with people, so had some very novel ideas about how that'll work.
Hey, Ryan, are you giving them all the answers?
No, not at all.
That's not fair.
They did discover some of them on their own, I will say.
All right, back?
Yeah, we can head back.
I'll close the rooms.
All right.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I was able to pop in a room and some interesting discussions.
Oh, perfect.
Thank you for the save there, Gary, with the prompts. I was like, I bet nobody remembers what the prompts were.
Right. Well, Michelle and I were kind of going, we forgot.
It's different when it stays up on a whiteboard, but...
Exactly. So you have to share your screen back again.
Yeah. All right. So welcome back. I hope, does everybody remember, maybe write down real quick whatever the last iteration of that sentence or that prompt response was. I want to come back to it. We're going to explore it a little bit, but I want you to remember what you said first. All right? So take a moment. All right. Why are we talking about this? Gallup polls have shown that 85% of the world is actively disengaged from their job. They don't like their job. To me, that is a pandemic in of itself. Now, I used that term prior to this situation, so a little bit different. But nonetheless, you have 85% of the workforce sitting in chairs doing things that they actively disdain. And the problem is you all, as future leaders, will be likely in charge of them or working amongst them. So how are you going to motivate them? We have to communicate with them every day, and that is really difficult. And so why do you roll out of bed? Why do you have the job that you have? And this is something that some folks struggle with, especially after the education system is set up the way it is. You go through college, you graduate, your frontal cortex is formed with executive functioning after you've set a career path. You know, I'd love to hear from some of you all. Why Why do you do what you do? What got you into it? Just real quick.
I love my job.
What do you do, Corey?
I'm a lead general foreman at the shipyard, Newport News.
And how did you come about that job?
Was a college dropout. My dad told me it was the military or the shipyard, so I said, I guess I'm going to the shipyard.
All right. Now, why do you love it so much?
I get to interact with people, manage production, so I get to do a lot with my hands. I get to interact with people on the floor. I get to teach, coach, so it's a lot of interaction that I enjoy.
That's excellent. That's a wonderful example. You're not in the 85%. I congratulate you. Anybody in the 85%, it's okay. This is a safe place. We can talk about anybody of you in a job where you're like, yeah, I'm doing it, but don't know if this is for me.
I joined as a software engineer 15 years back, and I wanted to do MBA long back, but due to different other priorities, I had to continue the job, and so that was the reason. It was not like I loved coding because I'm a software engineer. I hated coding from the very beginning, but still, I'm here.
So why continue, I guess?
Because I told you there were different priorities in my life, so I had to look after them first. That was the main reason.
Okay, all right. That's excellent. So I've done some preliminary research. I'm in addition to a managing role at an engineering firm, I'm also a paid researcher at Harvard. And I was hoping to launch a fuller study in this field this spring rather. However, COVID happened and we pivoted into studying how people are operating the workplace during this situation because it's unprecedented number of people working remotely in virtual work environments. And we really wanted to collect that data. But nonetheless, I had a hypothesis that most people are doing this work in those jobs because they had put themselves in that position in some way. They've been led to think that they need that title, that they need that income. And it's not a problem. You build this life around yourself, right? But all those are external regulation. They're the golden handcuffs, as you heard of. You have those great benefits. If I go over to that company, my insurance is going to suffer, and I have a wife and kids. So that's not a trade-off that you want to make, right? And that's exactly kind of what you're getting at. You already bought that house, so you have the mortgage, you have the car payment. So are you going to take that pay deduction to do that lifelong thing that you always wanted to do? Probably not, and that's why you continue onward, because this is the path you set. We're going to keep on going. And so I think a lot of it has to do with external regulation, is that you feel you have to do it. Maybe for status seeking, maybe for materialism, maybe for approval of others. Raise of hands, how many folks' parents had an idea of what they wanted to do when they grow up and they felt a little uncomfortable maybe not doing the thing that their parents said? Yeah, I think that's pretty common, myself included. So a lot of people do it for reasons that aren't intrinsic. So I want to talk about what is regulation. And we're going to get into this thing called self-determination theory. Self-determination theory is a motivational psychology theory presented by two pretty well-known psychologists, Ryan and DC. And what you see here on this screen is a continuum. It's called the self-determination continuum. I'm going to put it into layman's terms. On the far left, you have amotivation, non-regulation. There's this thing called the perceived locus of causality. That's a fancy word of saying where you feel like what you're doing is coming from. If it's impersonal is like literally slavery or something so beyond a personal relationship or an understanding of you that you feel forced to do it. You have no control over it. It's just purely coming at you. That's really rare to find most people in those situations. That's dire straits or life and death sort of situations. Then there's external regulation. This is more where you get punishment. So if I tell you that you're going to lose your job if you don't do this, that's pretty quickly telling you that you are going to be externally regulated. That's not something that, there's nothing about you in that situation other than your livelihood. but it's not quite all the way to impersonal. Then we get to introjected. This is kind of where people get this is very interesting. This is more where the culture comes in. This is where people are coming in with the job title. So your ego is in here. Are you doing this where I want to be a director of this company just because I want everybody to know that I'm a director? Or are you doing it because you would do that job for free almost? You're doing it because you want everybody to know that you're a director of that company, right? So that's where you have these internal rewards and punishments where you beat yourself up about something, but it's kind of in reality you're doing it for the approval of others. Then we get into identified regulation. So we're getting a little bit closer, and this is where you think that something, you think it's important to you, and so that's why you do it. You're not quite in love with it, and you may not identify with it, but it seems important. And largely that's what engineering is to me. If I'm being completely honest, engineering, I believe it's important. I think I'm pretty good at it. So why do I work in the engineering field? Well, really, a lot of it's because it's important to myself, and I think there's a lot of value to it. But I don't identify with it. I don't first say I'm an engineer when I introduce myself. That's not what I subscribe to be. Then there's integrated. This is where we're starting to get into an internal perceived locus of causality. I like to use, I was coaching with somebody and talking them through job positions they wanted to get into, and they were looking at employers, and they were looking at REI and like Lululemon. I was like, why? And they're like, because I identify with that company and their lifestyle. I feel like I'd be one with what's going on there. They're not one with yoga pants. They're not becoming one with the yoga pant and the art of the yoga pant. They could be. That'd be great. But in reality, they just identify. They see themselves in that brand, that job, that role. They love that. Lastly, we get into actual intrinsic regulation, which is real internal motivation. This is inherent joy and pure satisfaction. This is the idea, the utopiastic idea of, I would do this for free. Would you be doing this if I wasn't paying you to do it? And some of you may have read books about flow. This is where flow states happen. A lot of people believe this is where the flow state lives, is in this pure rush of you have ecstasy for doing this thing. That it doesn't matter. It's just a pure consequence that you're making money if that's what you're doing. So this doesn't just apply to jobs, but I like to study it in just the industrial sense. Do we have any questions on this continuum before I move forward? Okay, excellent. So let's crack this nut a little bit more. Self-determination theory is a fairly newer concept. It's been around since like the early thousands in a lot of literature, but it's still pretty academic. Many of you know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, maybe hygiene theory if you've taken an OB class. XY, the XY theories of leadership. Maybe you're going to be hard and maybe you're going to be nice. What this says is that there's a different type of universal needs, and it's not neglecting that you have the needs of living and food and water, but rather you have these universal needs for intrinsic motivation, which are autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And these are going to be the main topics I want you guys to remember: is autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Autonomy is the perception of choice. That's very important. Your perceptions are your realities. And so if you perceive you have a choice in something, or you give somebody the perception of choice, then they also have the reality in the perception of autonomy. It's kind of guiding into a whole. Competence is a few different things. It's compliments, but also challenge. You don't want to be doing anything that is so easy for you to do it's mindless. After a while, you get bored with it. But if something is extremely difficult and it's beyond anything you'll ever be able to do, you probably won't want to try very hard at it. A lot of people like to be in that 85% rule where they're really pushing themselves to the 85th percent, or their 85% of their ability, and they're keeping there. But in addition to that, it's how you talk to people. If I tell you that your work is worthless, then you don't feel very competent. You don't feel like you have the ability. But if I give you positive feedback, it might bode a little bit better for you. All right, so relatedness. This is where empathy and feedback comes in. So when we were talking earlier about loving working in the shipyard and talking with people and those relations, those interactions, and can you really feel like you're one with that team, that's where that's extremely important. All right. So you all got a handout, right? Does anybody not have the handout from the email Gary sent out? From Gary and Michelle? Okay. Check your email, please. And in that handout, it has some pieces of language you may be able to use. Some social scientists and medical professionals got together and they applied self-determination theory to the medical field. And they found that employees or people with lower back pain were fairly awful at following through on their physical therapy guidance, essentially. So what they started to do is they took a control group where they just let the doctors do whatever that the doctors usually do, and then took another control group and gave them these skills of reframing how they form their sentences to talk to their patients. They had extremely large compliance rates comparatively for those that did modify how they communicated with their employees using self-determination theory. And for those of you that don't know, lower back pain and back pain in general is highly correlated with suicide rates. So they were looking at this from a psychological perspective also because of that. And it was very interesting that they went about it with the treatment and care rather than outright talking about the psychological potential issues therein. So in this handout, I basically took this study and what they found, and I modified the sentence language to, rather than talking to patients about their care, these are situations you might have with employees, and talk to them about how they might remediate them or change their behaviors. So back to why a child. I was talking with our breakout group earlier. What are you trying to get out of a child that you're trying to get out of an employee, per se? How are they similar? Anybody?
Engagement.
How so, Corey?
With a child and with an employee, you're trying to get their buy-in. You're trying to motivate them, see what makes them tick. So you're trying to get that buy-in so that you can, help guide them in the direction that you need them to go.
Absolutely. Yes. I think it's Tim Ferriss says that, or maybe, it's Joe Rogan. He likes to say that he looks at everybody as a baby that grew up. We're all still babies. I hate to say it. We're all the kid inside that we were. As broken as it might be, it's still here. You're 100% right. You're motivating them, and they have the same reaction. That baby mind has the same reaction that your mind has too. And in fact, your most visceral, quick reactions are your baby mind. It's the inner core of your mind. It's your lizard brain, as some people call it, and it's pure emotion, and you react off of it very quickly. So it's very important when you're using communication and language in order to hit that lizard brain well and not disrupt it and blow it up, because it has a reaction to take over everybody's brain. It acts before cognition. You can't think about things when that is happening. And so Wendy Grolnick was a student, actually, of Ryan and DC, and she wrote this excellent book that I cannot recommend enough. I read it. Gary has it. It's highly annotated. I don't have children, and I love the book because it's all about communication. And all that she was trying to put into this is that you can't use phrases like, I want you to, you have to, must. These ultimatums. People talk about making ultimatums. You should not be making ultimatums. That's not the right way to go about it, because those are gun-to-the-head situations. If you feel like you have a gun to your head, then you're going to act instinctually and off of very primal emotions. You are not going to act off of logic, and you're not going to do well. You're not going to perform well. So this is critical. I highly recommend this book for anybody interested. So, real quick, I don't know if we have time for this, Gary, if you'd like me to rather do it in chat. Can we rewrite our original sentence and see what we came up with? Save your old one, but rewrite your sentence and address it with this new language that you may have. Let's relate to autonomy, competence, and relatedness.
Yeah, let's just do it in chat if you want to.
Yeah.
If people want to rewrite it, and then they can submit it on the chat bar, and you can see them. Or if you want to raise your hand and you want to speak them, you can do that too, I guess.
Yeah. Does somebody want to raise their hand and kind of share what they think they would do differently? Yes, sir.
The wild part about mine is I kept the same sentence because we had an argument in our group a discussion.
Okay.
And I was like, that it was the homework must be completed by the night or you can't play outside. I was like, I wouldn't, I can't speak for anybody else. I don't have kids like my servant. So I was like, I wouldn't make it an ultimatum, but I would be like, I would more let them know the consequences of them not doing their homework. Be like, well, if you don't do your homework, you're going to end up staying in first grade and would be with a whole new group of friends.
Interesting.
And if you want that, I understand. But I will help you be better if you want that. But go outside. Because I feel like one thing that nowadays, I say because I'm a little younger, my generation behind me, they have no self-determination. So you just can't give them ultimatums no more.
I'm going to push back on you, if you don't mind.
Yes.
So are you really providing options? Are those real options?
I mean, school isn't an option.
Is there a way for us to frame this such that they feel that they have options, but the school is not an option? Let me get you. You're like, oh. So let's talk about this. So what if we said something like, you want to go outside. I respect that. Maybe you want to go outside because it's light outside right now, and then it's darker later. You got to brush your teeth. You got to eat dinner. You got to do your homework, and you can go play outside. I'll let you decide how you want to arrange those, but they all four have to be done by the end of the evening. How are you going to plan your day? Tell me what do you want to plan your day for? And then it gives them the options, but am I anywhere telling them that they're not allowed to eat? Or that they're not going to eat, that they're not going to brush their teeth, that they're not going to do their homework? No, those are going to happen. And I'm throwing in the play outside in there too. We can add a time constraint to that. We can say, you have 30 minutes of outside time. So you can do it before or after, whatever. That's fine. But, how do you want to organize your day? Because then they're going to think about, oh, I have the ability to have choice. I'm going to go ahead and make my day. In reality, you're going to get the same output. But I would argue, to your point, when you put into that, do you want to take the first grade again, right? Where are you working on this regulation chart?
I'm definitely, is it external?
Yeah, you're external. Your rewards and punishments are pretty strong in that. Even if it sounds like there's choices, the choices are, not very pretty.
Hey, look, the only reason I thought it was more of a choice because it's like, you can choose to do the work. I'm not going to force you to do it because I want you to do it out of your own merit.
I get you. I understand where you're coming from.
But you have a consequence that I can't prevent from happening.
Right. That's why this perception of choice is really key in this autonomy function. It's really important. Corey, do you want to share real quick your part? And thank you for sharing. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, I can share. So our group talked about the child missed the winning shot in the basketball game. We started off kind of talking about what that meant to us. One of the things that I said was, you could go about it by asking how they think the game went. One that gets their buy-in, lets them know that you're kind of there for them, that soft approach. Roger was in my breakout. He talked about the soft approach. But, they already feel down that they missed the winning shot. So you don't have to scold them, right? You don't have to make them feel even worse. So my sentence was, if I have kids, so talking to my kids, son, you miss all of the shots you don't take. They've got to understand that it's okay to take a shot and miss a shot. In life, you're going to miss, right? Nobody's 100% accurate. And depending on how you handle that situation, you can shut them down. Going forward, they'll be afraid to take that. So I shared a story, I parent like that because I shared a story, long story short. My father was the exact opposite. My father didn't matter that you dropped 30 points. you missed the winning shot, your team lost the game. So I always vow not to parent like that. I think if you take the approach that, yeah, it would have been great to make the shot, you got to hold them accountable still, right? You got to set expectations. But you take that soft approach, get their buy-in, and let them know that, hey, it's going to be all right. You play again next week. So that's really just where I'm at with parenting.
Sure. Can anybody share how that approach plays into either autonomy, competence, and or relatedness?
I think it maybe would be closest related to the relatedness. Like it sort of makes them feel like somebody's on their side and it's okay to, like Corey said, make that mistake and it's okay to try again. But then setting that expectation, like they may even build their own expectation, like, okay, so I missed that shot. It's okay that I missed it, but what am I going to do to not do that again? Because they're naturally motivated by their own, they want to be better because people naturally want to make other people feel good or proud of them.
Absolutely.
And so I think it turns that into that.
That's great. I'm really glad you elaborated on that. And so to the competence part, I think that's kind of what you're getting at is you don't want them to feel like they're bad. I mean, one of the examples of this is should it really have been up to you in that last buzzer to make the game? You have a team behind you. You know, do you seriously think the team feels great about the situation? You know, it's not all up to you. You know, it's not your fault. You're good. Or you can talk about how, you know, Michael Jordan, he had to miss tons of shots probably on the buzzer. And that goes to relatedness. They can also relate to a very significant person and feel confident, and you're relating that person up to that level at times too. But yeah, absolutely. Well done. I don't want to belabor the point here.
I have a question about that.
Yeah,
if you don't mind. So what if it was some situation where, yes, they lost, they took the last shot and they lost, but what if it was their gameplay was detrimental to teamwork or something, or you saw some negative characteristic on how they approached that final shot? How would you go about bringing that to light without piling on this sense of kind of failure or something?
That's an excellent question. I think as long as you're operating from a point where you don't violate their sense of competence and give them a challenge. You know, for instance, we can say, perhaps you didn't make that shot, and that's okay. And then we can talk about, just like we talked about the homework option, right? The homework and the going outside. Maybe we give them a series of options and discuss how we might work with them. Once again, feel related. I'd love to work with you. Let's explore this, and then give them A, B, and C that might help their performance working with the team. And we'll discuss that together. And then that gives them choice, so then they feel autonomy. And so I think something like that. I think it's the biggest problem with this is the competence part, because people are very quick to criticize in a way that is not constructive, and that tears down that sense of competence. And then as soon as that happens, they shut down. They're not listening anymore. You know, you can't say I'm disappointed in you with that. But I think providing options with choice gives the perception of autonomy. You let them choose the choices, as long as they're not any choices that feel too contrived. And then they'll work past it, and then that way you'll get a better result next time. But I love that question. It's a good one. It's difficult. These aren't easy things to form. You know?
And as Corey said, I think getting the input, how do you think the game went, I think would help start that conversation.
That's a great one. Oh, yes. How do you think the game went? What is that playing to?
Yeah. And I believe that also it is critical to get to know your employees. And of course, we all know our children. Sometimes when we know what motivates them, what they're into, and the same thing with children, you can provide you can give them stories or provide some experience options from what is actually important to them.
Absolutely.
So actually our group discussed, they wrote an essay without a title. Uh-huh. So in this scenario, what we decided, it's really important to, first of all, understand if the kid understands what exactly they missed, because they're probably just not aware. And ask some probing questions.
Yes.
That about what is this? What is the essay about? If this is something they normally do in class, or they just forgot, or how do they normally write an essay, and what is the usual process? And when we understand, if they just don't understand the process at all, and we can clearly see this after a couple of questions, we can very easily guide them in the right direction. So of course, they're eager. They want to help. They want to get good grades. So once we kind of steer them that direction, and they're not feeling pressured instead of like yelling and screaming, and that's the initial thought. Because sometimes as parents and as managers, we can be upset, frustrated, especially if it's a repeated offense and they know better. This is the first emotions we have, and that's the first course of action we want to take. And this is normal. But we need to learn how to redirect these thoughts and just make them understand where was the mistake, how to correct it, so they don't make this mistake next time.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And that.
Hey, Ryan.
Yes, Gary.
Ryan, what about something like on the essay one, if I was to say, hey, I enjoyed reading your essay, and it really explained a lot of things about whatever the topic was. Do you think if we added a title, it would be even more descriptive for the person who was going to read it?
Excellent.
What would happen if we added a title that was more descriptive? Would that help the reader?
Excellent, because then it takes the blame off them. Relatedness, because you were saying that you read and you had an interest in. Relatedness in the question, that was kind of what I was getting at before. Asking a question itself is creating relatedness. Why do you like people that talk at you all the time? No. You like people that ask you questions. You related to them. And then by giving them a compliment, you're playing to their competence. And then in there, you never said that they had to put a title on there. You're, through suggestion, allowing them to put a title in there. So
do you think it would help make it even stronger?
Exactly.
Or something like that.
Exactly, because then you're hitting all the bases.
I remember, I think it's Dale Carnegie said that the only way to truly influence another person is to talk about what they want and show them how to get it. And so that approach, even to children or to even adults, because we're all just kids, right? As you already said, may be helpful too. I'll shut up. Keep going.
No, excellent. Yeah, no, that's what's so funny about this. Like Dale Carnegie, he wrote from like this life experience. He didn't write from this super academic relation, but it still holds true in that respect. Absolutely. All right, so I want to move on here. Obviously, we're not just talking about kids, like we said. So there are tons of situations that I'm sure all of you have experienced. You've either been in or on or above or below, where really, if we had all just formulated 3 sentences in a conversation more similar to this, we would have moved past this situation, grown from it, and all gotten the outcomes that we wanted. And that's where I find a lot of power in communicating in this style. So we only have a minute left on the buzzer, but does anybody want to wrap up real quick with how do you think that this framework would work? How can we make better conversations? I know a lot of you in the William and Mary tend to have military backgrounds currently, and this is something we talked about in our breakout group. One of the things I often get is that this sounds fluffy. And I'm also an engineer, so engineers think the same way. It's not direct and to the point. Does anybody want to elaborate on that real quick?
I'm not sure if I'm elaborating. I guess what I'm interested in is that, I guess, what are the counter arguments to this theory? Or during your research, what are the things that, you've been able to at least, if someone asked that question? Because for me, I no sociology background, but I read like Berger Luckman, Social Constructive Reality. And so for me, I challenge this idea as having a parent on like, hey, your primary socialization is one of being, going to have a demanding father, demanding mother. There's going to be things that you do because you're going to do them
And so to help counter some of that secondary socialization of, oh, we'll do it when we want, we'll figure it out. Like, no, some things have to be done. And even some of the most, recognized companies for autonomy are, when you peel back the curtain, the Amazon, the GE of the 80s and 90s, who are actually very demanding. There's not much autonomy, and if you don't meet deadlines or, generating alpha, you're let go. So what are some of the counters that you've been able to deflect with your theory? Thanks.
Thank you very much. Adam, is it? Thank you very much for asking that question. I'm glad you did. Anybody that's into research is trying to disprove the thing that they're really into. I'm trying to disprove this thing because I agree with you. There's got to be something wrong with it. There's two things. In my initial research, even though I saw the trends of most people still actively having disdain for their job, what was really interesting is most of them had provisions for autonomy, competence, and relatedness in the workplace. So even though they were provided for, it still seemed like they weren't satisfied, or they didn't feel intrinsically motivated, I should say, rather. Job satisfaction and intrinsic motivation are slightly different things. They are different. So they were both not satisfied with their jobs and felt like they were mostly doing their jobs for external purposes, basically for society. That's why I wanted to do more research, because I want to know why that is. If I give you all these things, you might feel more sense of agency, and you might act that way. And I do think that there's power to it, but I don't think this is a silver bullet. So that's one of the main things that I have seen, is that I don't know if it's application, and because it's not socialized in a way that a majority of these companies really make it a part of things, such as even email chains being communicated perfectly this way. Because when you talk about Google and stuff, somebody might have read Dale Carnegie's book and understand the whole relatedness portion, but not understand competence and autonomy, for instance, or guiding and nudging perceptions. I think there's a lot more to it, and I think it hasn't been well expressed if it does work that way. I hope that's an articulated answer, but it should be challenged, and I do want it to be challenged, and it's very new relative to a lot of the things that you probably have learned in organizational behavior. What doesn't help, by the way, Adam, which is actually my next slide, is Gary likes choice theory. And as soon as I told Gary about this concept, he's like, that sounds like choice theory. Choice theory is just one example. It's a good book. Once again, it's kind of about this self-determination. It overlaps in so many ways, as you see here. It's nearly identical. You will see this in many things. You'll see this in some of Tony Robbins' simple 5 bullet points. You'll see this it's replicated elsewhere. I like it because this is kind of the academic structure for it, where it has been tested in medical fields, and a lot of it's been done into childhood development and education, actually. That's where most of the research I've seen is in. But no, excellent question. All right. As I wrap up here, I do thank you all. I want to be cognizant of time. If you have any further questions, I don't know if you want to provide some time now, Gary. Otherwise, my email is right here. You can always contact me and discuss. I love this stuff.
Yeah, we can take a few questions if you'd like. That's fine. I think we have some time.
Absolutely.
Maybe 5 minutes or so if anybody has a question. Especially those of you who haven't had a chance to speak tonight. If you'd like to jump in, that would be great.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the discussion, so to speak, with regards to, it seems like your presentation's overall focus is on self-determination theory and focusing on really aspects of motivation. But what I'm curious is, and it relates to, the first few chapters of our course, which is you have your stakeholder, you have your recipient, and it's them interpreting the message, and then aspects of that message is self-determination theory, right? So motivating them properly and things like that. Well, kind of playing devil's advocate to contrast that is, let's say you don't have a good message, but there are other things that you do well, like you show that you care, you establish trust with the person that you're trying to influence, and you have a lot of time and availability. So it seems like that could contrast self-motivation theory, because as long as you're
a person that is highly available, have a good relationship, a good image with that person, you can still steer them in a certain direction without having to go too deep into self-motivation theory.
I like that. Thank you for sharing that. I don't disagree with you. There's a concept in jazz that sometimes the best note to play is no note at all. So you're 100% right. One of the things that I'm saying right now is pushing information out. But you're saying be available, and I want to make sure I'm understanding you properly. Be available and open for people to come to you, and providing kind of more of like an arena for people to be. Like you're saying, like an open door policy, getting to know people.
Right, I'm saying the focus could be more on the relationship itself. Just the amount of effort you put into the relationship, time.
Yes.
So that
I would say that
it seems like it's the counteracting weight in terms of self-motivation theory. Like you can say all these things, you can do all these things right, but if you don't have a good relationship with your child, with your employee, because they don't trust you, you can do all these things right, but they still won't work for you or listen to you.
I agree. And I think that's why one of the key pillars of this is the need of being able to relate. If you do not have a relationship, you cannot relate, right? So if we undermine that fact, it's not going to matter how great I say you are if you don't know who I am necessarily. That's not going to make you internally motivated. That's going to make you feel temporarily really happy, which is why I argue that a lot of people like Tony Robbins do that most of the time. I'm not saying that he has poor things, but he made you feel good. I'm not here to make you feel good. I'm here to change your behavior. So I'm not sure that we're disagreeing. I don't think they're at odds with one another. I think in order to build that relationship is the only way that you can motivate people to act in a manner that is positive to what you have aims for. Does that make sense? I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah, it's a part of the process.
Yeah, because also, if I take away your autonomy, if I take away your autonomy, are we going to have a great relationship? I hope not. That'd be concerning. We could explore that differently, but I think they all play into each other. But I think that's a great point. I think the relationship is the most important part in many ways, and I think that's why it's taught so much. In your OB class, relationships is probably a lot of what you go into, is how you build these relationships and culture and the organizational dynamics and all that stuff. So yeah, this is definitely in the weeds, but I'm with you. I'm with you. Yes.
Hey, Ryan, would it be fair to say that two things? One, if you can start a relationship with these things in mind, then you're way ahead of the game. And it's kind of like we sometimes learn these things, but the relationship with somebody we have has already been going on for 2 or 3 years. And then we're trying to change midstream, where if you can embrace these concepts and use them at the beginning of the relationship, it's probably going to be stronger. And number two, would it be, I always think about, we all have these power differentials in our relationships. And as a parent, you can always play the card that says, I'm the daddy and you'll do what I say. And because you always have that power to do that. But that should always be a last resort.
Yes.
And I think that what you're sharing with us is ideas that we can do. And I think I think Adam, you're in the military, right? And in a military relationship, that's absolutely a situation where you do what I say and you do it now, because it's a life or death situation. And you always have the power to do that. But not every relationship requires the life or death order to do this. And so just what I've experienced, and probably what you found in your research, we can save ourselves a lot of pain if we're willing to inspire other people to make it be their idea, and then they're far more willing to charge ahead with it because they think they thought of it. One thing that I call it is, when I work with my clients, I call it guided self-discovery. And if I can get you to understand what you need to do and have you go charging up the hill about that, that's great. And I didn't have to use any of my power.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah,
anyway. Because here's my whole arc with this whole thing is that the way that we've predicated society, communication, power structures, organizational design, a lot of it has to do with this hierarchical, authoritarian power structure. And a lot of that causes you to have to do something because somebody else said so. And the thing I haven't talked about with this is mental health. And that does have lots of mental health implications and behavioral implications throughout your lifetime. And they compound. And with this and using this as a framework and other things very similar to it, perhaps maybe we can help the global zeitgeist in mental health of how we communicate with each other, like you're saying, Gary, so everybody can live happily, utopiastically, doing the things that they love. That would be the preference. But obviously we are far from that. We have lots of work to do. Lots of work to do.
I would like to share an example.
Yes.
So when the whole pandemic started and I had to continue pursuing my MBA, work from home, and homeschool children. My husband was working from home, and I was the only one who was left at home doing all of this by myself. It was quite a challenge, and plus I have a 3-year-old. So I just kind of sat down and thought, how am I going to fix this? Because this needs to be done, and I'm on the phone all the time, so with customers, clients, and employees. So I sat down with my daughter and asked her to put together a plan. How will she be successful through this? And I kind of kept talking about it. I said, hey, you have some time, think about it. It's not immediate, but you have a week to think about it and just write something down and we'll figure it out. So, and then a week later, we sat down, put it together, and then I brought a huge board from my office and she wrote it down. So it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And she knew exactly what she had to do at certain time.
Oh, wow.
When breaks were, when everything was, and that worked just perfectly.
And did she adhere to that? Like, was she excited about it and adhere to it?
Because she was the one who made a decision what time to break, what time was her lunch, and we kind of moved it around because it was fluid.
I love
so
that.
So an option. So I kind of utilized the same approach with several employees, and that was very successful.
Absolutely. If there's any, you raising your hand, I'm going to get to you in a second if you don't mind. Sorry, Shelly.
Okay.
Sorry, names are not appearing sometimes. In this situation, I think this has allowed a lot of managers to realize that they're micromanaging and not allowing autonomy and playing to people's competencies. And I hope more people allow those flexibilities and express them, such as you. Like, if you allow your employees to make their own plan, guess what happens? They do it, and the work gets done. Who would have thought? Shelly.
I think you guys just kind of covered my takeaway from it, and it's kind of simple. I like to keep it simple when I'm at work, and I find that if I can establish a common goal with a person or a group of people, that tends to develop the motivation intrinsically on its own. So when people feel like they have become a part of something and they value it, and they value the end result or the goal, you're about 50% of your way there insofar as making sure they're motivated to stay on board.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Yes. There's a lot of goal-setting theory overlap with this. All right. I want to wrap this up now, but I really do appreciate you all's time. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Michelle. And thank you all very much. This is a blast. And feel free to reach out.